Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where this finds you, and a warm welcome to this first webinar in a series of events that UNIDIR is organising with our colleagues in UNODA and the Friends of the Chair. This series of events are intended to support ongoing activities of the BWC Working Group and stimulate thinking and discussion around different topics which are on the agenda. You can find more details of this webinar series through the links that my colleagues will share in the chat. But this particular event is focused on the topic of a scientific and technological advisory mechanism for the Biological Weapons Convention. At the outset of this event, I should note that this is being recorded and we will make the recording available online in the coming days. To provide a little bit of context for today's discussion, some form of a more systematic science and technology review has been raised by many states over the evolution of the Biological Weapons Convention. Indeed, I think the earliest reference I've been able to find is actually from the first review conference in 1979, when a state referred to or suggested a small but open-ended group of experts should be asked to conduct an S&T review. I think since then, we've seen many states from across regional groups have in various ways and at various times called for some sort of body to look at a more systematic review of science and technology. And of course, at the last review conference, states parties agreed to further discussion around an S&T review mechanism, and this has become part of the current BWC Working Group mandate. That working group had one day of discussion around a mechanism last year, and there will be another day of discussion coming up in August of this year, among other things. But the working group covers several agenda items and has limited time. And so it seems an important opportunity to use these sort of events to keep the conversation going and to help delegates prepare over what is going to be another busy year in disarmament. It is in that spirit that today we've brought together a panel of excellent speakers to discuss the mechanism. And I will begin that panel shortly, which will be followed by a Q&A session. But before that, however, I'm delighted to be able to give the floor to Ms. Bárbara Bélkior de Souza e Silva. Bárbara is the Deputy Permanent Representative of Brazil to the Conference on Disarmament and will be familiar to many of you in this webinar. Bárbara has agreed to provide some opening remarks on behalf of Brazil. On behalf of Ambassador Flavio D'Amico, the Permanent Representative of Brazil to the Conference on Disarmament, and indeed the Chair of the BWC Working Group. Bárbara, thank you very much for joining us, and the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, James. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Ambassador D'Amico, who is the chair of the working group, cannot join us today due to prior commitments that he had. He's chairing the MPCR meeting in Paris. But I am honored to deliver an opening reflection on his behalf. Many thanks to his robust team of friends on SAP and to the UNIDIR for the great initiative of promoting this discussion. The 9th Review Conference called us for developing a specific mechanism to address the rapid developments in science and technology within the context of the Biological Weapons Convention. As we convene, let us acknowledge the profound impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which highlighted significant vulnerabilities in our global public health systems and response capabilities. These realities make our current deliberations timely and absolutely critical. We are tasked with developing a framework that effectively addresses both immediate challenges and future demands. It is essential to prevent any mission creep that might dilute the BWC's role in biosecurity governance. We must remain proactive and deliberate in defining our scope and in implementing actions that clearly establish BWC's leadership in this field. We have incorporated external expertise through expert panels, which have significantly enriched our discussions. Engaging with a variety of specialists has deepened our understanding and enhanced our strategies for science and technology. Reflecting on the work done since our working group was established 16 months ago, we have tackled a broad spectrum of topics with considerable depth and insight. Today, we address a potential cross-cutting feature of the BWC framework, a mechanism dedicated to scientific and technological advancement, a critical step toward leveraging our collective knowledge for practical application. 2023 marked a year of significant achievement, largely due to the prolific and dedicated efforts of our friends of the chair. Their commitment has built a critical mass of expertise and cooperation, setting a strong foundation for today's objectives. This growing expertise has accelerated our progress and expanded our capabilities to address the issues at hand. Our objective today is to build upon the substantial groundwork laid in previous meetings. We are not revisiting old debate, but advancing from a robust foundation towards a more informed and actionable framework. This new mechanism could foster an ongoing exchange of knowledge, particularly benefiting countries with fewer resources dedicated to scientific research. By promoting shared understanding and collaborative efforts, we aim to enhance global biosecurity readiness. The framework we developed must be technically feasible and politically tenable, ensuring that our efforts are practical and also widely supported, thereby maximizing their impact and effectiveness. As we move forward, let us engage with a sense of urgency and a commitment to achieving concrete outcomes. Together, we can establish a robust framework that not only addresses today's challenges, but is also adaptable to the uncertainties of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bárbara, and our thanks also to Ambassador D'Amico and the Brazilian team for your wise words, but also your ongoing collaboration, which is much appreciated on our side. That I now like to turn to our panel. Just before I offer the floor to our first speaker, a reminder, if you want to put any questions or share any comments with the panelists, please do so through the Q&A function, which should be available at the bottom of your screens. We'll then sort through the questions and put those to panelists. One thing to note is when you do submit questions, these will be anonymized by default, so I won't read out the names of the person submitting the question. If you do want me to do so, then please put your name and any affiliation in the Q&A box as well, so I can actually mention where the question has come from. With that in mind, I'll now turn to our panel. And first, I'm delighted to be able to offer the floor to Dr. Clarissa Rios Rojas, who's a political affairs officer with the BWC Implementation Support Unit. Clarissa has a PhD in molecular biology and a master's degree in biomedicine and neuroscience, and has spent several years working to bridge the gap between science and policymaking. So I believe Clarissa is well placed to provide an overview. So Clarissa, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jamie. Can you see my presentation on full screen now?
Yes, we can, and we can hear you clearly.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity today. I would like to start by saying that, of course, we all know that science and technology has been supporting processes, mechanisms, providing advice, and is well established in different disarmament regimes. And the main objective for this science and technology advice is to monitor relevant advances, technological advances, and to provide advice. So with those bases, I thought, what can I bring today that the delegates already know? But I thought that it would be good to go and look at the disarmament treaties and conventions and pick up maybe some important examples that can be used as food for thought for the ongoing upcoming consultations. So for that, I have selected 4 examples, and I'm going to go one by one with them. The first one will be what's the oldest report where we have been giving some insights on science and technology, and that will be the Secretary General's report on current developments in science and technology. and their potential impacts for international security and disarmaments. So this report has been offered to diplomats since 1990, and the topics until 2018 have been in relation to nuclear, space technology, information and biotechnology, materials technology. And they have also had this tool where they call for experts to submit individual papers where they assess the impact and military potentials of recent developments. And they also accompanied this in 1990 by holding a high-level conference on new trends in science and tech, and what are the implications for international peace and security. So now, if we go and do a zoom in on the report from last year, you can see that the report is 2.5 pages, and it doesn't go into the nitty-gritty of science and tech recommendations and updates from the previous year, because it's not really its mandate. Its mandate is to showcase an overarching status of science and technology for different sections. And in this section, as you can see, I have highlighted keywords there for you to more or less follow, but I'm sure you have already read the report. And I just want to bring to your attention the last year report was also mentioning that the BWC was coming up with some consultations and trying to come up with a science advisory mechanism. Now, if we go and look at other conventions and treaty, of course, the one that will come to everyone's mind will be everything related with the Chemical and Weapons Convention. And as you know, this board is shaped by 25 independent experts. They serve in personal capacity, and they serve for up to 6 years, 2 rounds of 3 years. And they are always looking what are the latest science and technology developments, and then they see how they can be applied specifically or mostly for their verification activities. And I would also like to bring your attention to a paper that was published some weeks ago in the Nature magazine. And I want to just extract one part of that paper where it says that the scientific endeavors are particularly important for those states with more limited resources and unable to monitor the various advances in science and technology. So in this paper, they highlight that this is one of the many best outcomes that they have when they have been establishing this science advisory board. But now I would like to zoom in again and bring you an example of the temporary working groups. I thought that this will be beneficial to point out because on the next consultations, you're going to be discussing composition and all different details. So I just wanted to give you a snapshot of what's happening with the working group for the analysis of biotoxins, which is the most recent one. So for this working group, of course, the board members have relevant expertise, but they also can support their work by having additional external experts. Their mandate is for 2 years, and they have themselves like 5 subgroups within. And they are tasked to address specific questions that come from the Director General, but they report back to the Scientific Advisory Board, so the 25 members. They meet 7 times a year, 4 virtually and 3 in person. And for this particular working group, they are funded by the European Union. So now that we have already thought about these temporary working groups, so I would like to bring you a little bit outside. So let's zoom out and let's think about how much do you want to do with science and tech? Because of course you can produce reports, but I also wonder if you are thinking about what are going to be the next steps. And in that case, I would like to bring to your attention examples from CTBTO, which is a treaty that is hoping to have a world free of nuclear testing. And for doing that work, science and tech is very ingrained in their work. And then you can see here that they have systems that work together to detect nuclear tests around the globe. And that could be, for example, the International Data Center, International Monitoring System, global communications infrastructure, and they are even ready for future on-site inspections. So all these techniques are very heavily dependent on science and technology. And I thought it would be good to bring it up just for you to think about if we are thinking, if we have this vision as well for the BWC, what are we envisioning? Are we thinking about having laboratories at some point? Are we thinking about having data collection and also analysis of these data centers? So that's something that I thought it would be good to bring today. And also, I would like to mention that in this treaty, they also have science and technology conference series with the aim to foster innovation and enhance the treaty's verification regime. Another example that I want to bring to your attention from our UNODA side is that in parallel, right now, also we have some science and technology proposals to create a technical expert group for the small arms and light weapons. And this idea came up when they realized that they need to address current challenges that are coming from recent new technologies. And they realized that now for these weapons, they are using polymers, 3D printing. So this type of technical expertise, they realized that they are missing. So now they are coming up with this proposal that you can see here. And basically, they want to establish a mechanism that is capable of monitoring and develop effective measures for dealing with future technologies. So they see that they have polymer and 3D printing now, but they are also wondering what's coming next. And they see this proposal as something that can help them in that sense. And part of that proposal also includes includes a description that they want to use this technical expertise to also bridge the technological gap between states through international cooperation and assistance. And another part that I also found very interesting was that when they talk about the composition, they also include industry and private sector and civil society, which is something that I thought that we could also have it as food for thought. So finally, this is my last slide, I think. It's let's think about what do we have in terms of science and technology within the Biological Weapon Convention. So of course, you have been hosting the meeting of experts on review of developments in the field of science and tech. When you host your RevCons and your meeting of state parties, you also invite academics and researchers as panelists to give you an update on science and tech. The Youth for Biosecurity Fellowship is bringing scientists from the Global South to come to the Biological Weapon Convention and learn. We also have some NCPs that are like pure scientists and are part of the process of implementation at the national level. And there are also examples when we have been hosting conferences on science and tech in preparation for RevCons. So for the future of the BWC, I see that some areas that are going to be depending heavily on very technical expertise are some of the working group topics. Of course, science and tech, the ICA, the international cooperation and assistance, verification. And I thought that science and technology is there for us to harness and to see how we can adapt it to us. And my last slide is now to finalize with a quote from our awesome colleagues from UNIDIR, where they highlight that BWC state parties may need to build a common understanding around why they require a review, who the review is for, and how any outputs or advice will be used. Clarity around these questions can enable the state parties to develop a mechanism that best suits their needs. And with that, I thank everyone, and I'm happy to receive any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clarissa, for providing what I think was a really useful overview of existing mechanisms in the disarmament context. I'd also echo the point you raised around the benefits of knowledge sharing and that point about bridging the technological gap, because I think that's really important. So thank you, Clarissa. I'd now like to turn to Ljupčo Gjorgjinski, who is a senior fellow with DiploFoundation, and also we're delighted to see a UNIDIR fellow now. Ljupčo was the facilitator for the topic on science and technology review mechanisms during the 9th review conference process. And now he is currently one of the friends of the chair and well placed to provide us an overview of the discussion around a science and technology advisory mechanism. So with that, Jivan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jamie, and thank you for the kind invitation and as well for hosting this great event. I think it is very necessary, as you say, for us to build up our common understanding of what exactly we need. This quote that Clarissa just mentioned, I think it gives a very good framework. The why is this necessary? Who is it for? And how would it function? I will not go into the why. I think that has been very capably presented thus far. And again, gratitude to Ambassador D'Amico for his leadership and his team and his amazing team, really, for providing us with great support and a great framework to have these kinds of discussions, as well as the ISU. And Clarissa is here supporting us, really brilliant as always, and no need to emphasize, well, actually there is a need to emphasize that they are brilliant and they should be supported and they should be a part of the long-term future of the BWC in an enhanced manner. Having said that, let me, and having said as well that I think that the why has been covered, let me focus a bit on the how. For that, let me share my screen so that we have a visual aid. Is that visible? Is that okay? Everybody can see it? So I wanted to focus, as I said, on the how. I think that the why has been covered, and obviously all of this is so that we can get to a point of having a science and technology advisory review mechanism within the BWC, as Jamie has already said, long overdue. 79, I think Jamie mentioned, was the first time that it has been mentioned. That's a very, very long time, way overdue. So in the how, I think that it is useful for us to have an idea of what a conference decision would look like, so that we have the final result of this work visible to us, and we can think about what are the different possibilities that are ahead of us and how we can really well prepare ourselves for that. A conference decision can be one of three main things. The first is just a decision to have an S&T advisory mechanism. And that's something that, in a way, the past REFCON did. The 9th REFCON said in paragraph 19 of section 3, decided to develop with a view to establishing a mechanism to review and assess scientific and technological developments. And they now repeat the text, but that's basically what was possible, and that's quite a lot, so that we can have this working group and have this work ahead of us. So that's one option of having even the next possibility of us making a decision to have an S&T advisory mechanism, and then for that mechanism and the bodies within the BWC, there's an MSP, obviously, and other ways to develop itself, perhaps a general framework of how it should do so, but then it does it itself. A second possibility is for there to be a decision and a language on the general structures, but the details left to the MSP or the body itself to draft. So basically a review conference, a special conference has been mentioned as a possibility. A political conference occurs, and it has a decision that an S&T body should be formed, and it says it should have this and this in it, some kind of a general structure of it. And a third possibility is obviously these two, so a decision plus general language, but then really some details, the terms of reference, the rules of procedure. And those of you from the 9th Review Conference, remember that we actually had that as a possibility. We got quite far in mentioning, I think, and following on Ambassador D'Amico's leadership. Bárbara just mentioned it as well. We have that foundation, so we have many of the details. We have a great deal of density of detail that we can work with. One possibility to add to this is that it's not just a decision with a general language and a terms of reference and rules of procedure, but also proposes a first topic to discuss in the next intersessional period. We've called these so far intersessional processes and periods. So let me work with that language from now on as well. So again, a conference finishes, it says all the details of the mechanism, but it also provides what topic it should start off with. So this is an ambitious but possible package that I think that we can all work with. So with that, I think that there's two important considerations in the how, and I think that they were very well represented, both in terms of Bárbara's and Clarissa's presentations, and that is that we have to look at this process in through two prisms. The one is we need to develop a mechanism that is really fit for purpose. It needs to be functional. It needs to be have a way of functioning efficiently. It needs to have independence of its work, to look at the problems that are coming up in an expert manner, to have the resources to do so, and to be able to really provide advice and even recommendations, but possibly that are well thought out and considered. So that is the fit for purpose. The other it is, and it's equally important, obviously, this is a political forum, is that it is politically feasible. So we need to think about how we can come to the finish line in a manner that ensures consensus. So I divide this into two because I think that inherently there is a lot of overlap between the two. But for some things, we need to be clear of what's what, so that we can make the decision objectively in each of the four, and we don't mix up why something is taken as such and not. So let's start with the functional, with the fit for purpose. We've discussed, and again, this is starting with the foundation that we have, to have a hybrid model. The hybrid model would have one open-ended body, and it would have one limited size body. So I put this intentionally in the functional fit for purpose because I think that there's been a trend to mix this up as a political compromise. It may be so to a degree. When we have been over the years thinking about an open-ended part and a limited size part, these were two possibilities, and we've, to a great degree for years, got stuck to this, that it needs to be either one or the other. I think we've come to an agreement with a lot of great support from civil society, from the support, which is very important, I think, in our considerations. UNIDIR published a study where a hybrid model was considered as a possibility. The FAS, the Federation of American Scientists, also had workshops where they started working with that. And then we were in the run-up to the 9th Review Conference, we were working with this possibility of an open-end model. So this is, yes, the politically feasible part. But I would say that that's not the only place for us to put that. I think that it can be really something that is functional. I think that there's a logic to be had in having an open-ended body, which has all the experts, independent experts from all states parties that are parties of the Biological Weapons Convention, and it can have a general discussion on a certain topic given to it by the political forum, above all the review conference, possibly the MSP, and then it can have that discussion continue in a more focused manner by the limited size body of, let's say, of 20, of 25, or 30 experts drawn from the open-ended body. So there is a logic here that is functional. It's not just a political compromise. And I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I really want to emphasize that that is the case. The second is within this, what is the general form? What is the purpose of this? We've provided this very short sentence. It's in the first discussion that we have at the informals, the form and the function, but this is just a general kind of description of what it is. To assist states parties by providing specific subject matter advice on scientific and technological developments relevant to the convention. So very simple, but it does capture the essence of it. Obviously, even during the informal we just had, we have already some proposals, and this is the way to build this up in a proper manner. Instead of having assists, perhaps we provide here. We perhaps delete assist, or we work with the language. But basically, this is how we can get to that proper understanding of what it is. The other two parts that I would mention in the functional aspect of it is how the experts are appointed, what they do, how do we ensure it within this thinking of the fit for purpose, because then we will get to the politically feasible part, and this will become a key consideration. But we also need to think of having a process that is within this fit for purpose in terms of an appointment of experts for both bodies, but especially for the limited size body, that makes sure that the experts who are there have the proper background in science and technology, have the proper understanding of the issues that are going to be discussed and can contribute in an independent manner, that the body itself obviously is well balanced in terms of expertise, which is equally important, so that it's not all genetic biologists, or not all one specific area, so that there are different kinds of expertise within it. And even just perhaps outside of life sciences, perhaps other expertise are necessary as well. So this balance as well is necessary. And I emphasize this in the fit for purpose part. And then the report. How is a report developed from the open-ended body? How is it then developed within the limited size body? And what happens to those reports? Who do they report to? And what is the format of the report? Is it just an general information on what they've discussed? Does it have some specific advice so that delegations come to a meeting of the MSP and they can take it home? If not something to do with within the BWC, delegations can always take the insights that are shared there to their domestic institutions, to their ministries of health, to their ministries of defense, of foreign affairs, whatever there is, and they can do something with it. So what is the report? And this is why I mentioned this in this part. But let's get then to the politically feasible part. Obviously, the first part that is necessary is that it needs to enjoy consensus. When we get finally to a package that is that has the common understanding of all participants, that is some degree of compromise, that doesn't hopefully compromise too much on that functional part, so that we keep on bearing this functional part in there. But then we need to come to a point where we need to have a consensus decision, which is the way of the functioning of the convention it has been. To do that, we need to work obviously within the BWC framework. The key body of the Biological Weapons Convention is the Review Conference. And it is the most political event and institution within the convention that needs to make all the relevant decisions and give the direction for the future of intersessional process after that review conference, whichever it is. We have an annual meeting of states parties, another invention that we've had over the years. We've had, as has been mentioned, other parts within that intersessional period. We have meetings of experts, we've had other, but these are the key. Obviously, we have an ISU that needs to be strengthened. We've all sang the praise of the competency and really the support that the ISU has provided over the years. Now we go into what the mechanism would be that fits into basically this mechanism, this bodies of the BWC, and how we can work within that framework. So we go back to, again, hybrid model, which has an open-ended body, open to all experts, a limited size body, and the possibility to establish, as Clarissa mentioned earlier, the possibility of establishing temporary working groups which would focus on specific issues. Let's go one by one. Before going into the one by one aspect that needs to be considered is who will chair each of these. Or will it be one chair for all of them? So now we start getting into the decisions that we need to start making of how we make it politically feasible, but also functional. It needs to be able to function well within it. So the open-ended body, it would have independent experts from the text that we've worked with so far that are accepted as members at the next meeting of the open-ended body or group. Each nominated expert should have a background in a relevant field. And what it would do, it would consider each study topic and provide its technical findings as food for thought for a limited size body. Obviously, this is language we can work with. They can, and we need to over the coming weeks so that we can really enrich this and make sure that it is acceptable to all, and at the same time, keeping in mind this functional part. Within this body, we do mention independent experts. We do mention that the need that they should have a background in the relevant field. We also have 184 at the moment, if I'm not mistaken, states parties. Not all are able to have an independent expert, especially not if it is coming to Geneva. So we need to be able to understand this, but at the same time, there should be an expectation that the experts nominated should have a background in the relevant field. How we ensure that, I think it is best if it is left to the states. I think that it is useful if there is some kind of help and facilitation, perhaps by the ISU, to really emphasize the need of having experts who do have the background in that field. But we do need to have an understanding as well that such is the case. Perhaps we can ensure experts who participate online or some way or another, and thus ensure the participation of the full world. The key thing here is then we have those experts and they have a topic, and I'll go later into how a possible timeline would be of how it would function from a first review conference onward. So bear with me for a second on how they could function in the future, but specifically thinking about it, how we might start off with the next conference that decides, hopefully, to have the whole mechanism. The limit-sized body, the experts need to be drawn from the open-ended body. And then appointed, and this is where how to achieve consensus on the appointment. I've highlighted this green to basically put a little emphasis on where the biggest tendencies between the functional aspect of it and between this political consideration is. This is one of them. This is one of the key ones. How do we get to a body that has perhaps 20 or 25 or 30 members or whatever number we decide? How do we decide? How do we make sure that it has that good balance of expertise, that has a good geographic balance, that it has a good gender balance? These are the things that we need to decide in the coming months, and we need to obviously put both our political hat on, but also our functional hat on, to make sure that we don't end up with as a compromise, let's say, a 50 or 60 member limited size body, because that would defeat the purpose of having the limited size body. If it is a smaller number, we have less options of how do we make sure that there is proper balance of all kinds in it. This is a text that it is, again, with some of the Friends of the Chair text that was proposed last August. And it is something that we will discuss, obviously, especially in the coming up meeting in the informal, for which a text will be provided tomorrow, and on the composition part. We also need to have a body, because there are possibilities of a topic being quite difficult. We need to have the possibility of establishing temporary working groups, something that will be very specific. And I see Jamie has turned this camera on. Probably I'm running a bit with time, so I'm sorry about that. I'll try to rush it. So we need to have temporary working groups. They need to be able to be formed quickly, to have a narrow mandate with a specific time frame on a specific issue, and there should be a small that should draw from the membership of the BWC, but at the same time, it should really ensure that there is expertise for that specific issue. So very quickly then, let's see what a typical BWC timeline is and how this would function within it. If there is a REFCON 0, so a REFCON where there is a decision at it, or special conference, so political conference where a decision can be made to establish it. The possibility of mandating the first topic or theme, as I said, was there, as, so that the REFCON not just decides that there should be a mechanism, that it should be formed in such and such a manner, that these are the terms of reference and rules of procedure, but also to says, consider this broad topic over the next intersessional period. So right away, the start is that there will not be an MSP immediately after the REFCON, obviously. So the mechanism should be able to start immediately. If it is not given the general details, then it will focus and work on how it would function, draw its own rules of procedure, terms of reference, etc. If it is given already a topic, it can start immediately on the topic, and then we would have the open-ended body focus on that specific issue, give it to the limited-sized body for an more in-depth study, and have a consensus report that goes to the MSP of that first year. The MSP reviews that report, offers direction for the following year. The following, we start again with the open-ended body and the limited-sized body, gives a report to the MSP, and then we come to the fourth year of the MSP, the year before the review conference, an S&T mechanism that is in its fifth year, which is just before the review conference. This is where we need to be able to, sorry, let me just draw this a little bit, be able to go directly through the REFCON. the last year of that. The RefCon then can decide not just on the topic and how it's been discussed, but how the instrument has functioned, the mechanism has functioned so far, and then it can draw its own discussions. And I think that to emphasize this as a last point and conclude on it, I think that we've gotten among the several other aspects of getting stuck on how do we take this forward. One of the ways is that do we establish this as a mechanism that exists? Nothing in the BWC, unfortunately, as we know very well with the ISU, exists as a permanent structure. The MSPs function from year to year. The intersessional process is given by each review conference. So even this would function until the next RefCon. And then the RefCon has the possibility of saying, well, this worked and it didn't work. And I think that we need to bear that in mind. I'll stop there because I think I've taken a bit more time, but obviously I'm open for any questions and comments and discussions on this. Thank you very much, Jamie.
Thank you, Ljupčo. I didn't mean to rush you at all. I think it was really interesting to follow that, and at least sort of letting us into your own mind map and laying out your thinking around decisions, functions, models, and various other things. I would also say there's probably quite a lot for participants to digest, trying to follow the mind map. So I wonder whether it, in due course, if perhaps you could share that, it might be of interest. But if that's okay with you. I also suspect you've stimulated some questions and comments from participants. Please do submit those questions, any questions you have for panelists. We will get to them. But before that, I'm delighted to be able to turn to Rania Costi, who is the Executive Director of the Inter-Academy Partnership and Director of the Board on International Scientific Organizations of the US National Academies. Rania was involved in the organization of a proof of concept meeting on a BWC scientific advisory body, which was led by the IAP. And I'm hoping today she can present on some aspects of that. And with that, thank you for joining, Rania. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I'm going to start sharing my slides. Okay, can everyone see this? Okay, very good. Thank you very much again to the organizers for inviting me to this very important meeting. As Jamie said, I'm the director of the Inter-Academy Partnership Office in Washington, DC. A little bit about IAP and who we are. We are a global network of academies of science, medicine, and engineering. We have 150 members currently. And very importantly, we have 4 regional networks in the Americas, Europe, Africa, Asia, Oceania, which give us the regional context for whatever work we are doing. We have 2 secretariat offices, the one that I direct, hosted by the National Academy of Sciences, and we have a second one in Trieste, Italy, which is hosted by the World Academy of Sciences, and it falls under the UNESCO system. Our mission is to convene and empower the academies globally and to work collaboratively to address issues of global and regional interest. We don't cover one topic specifically. We typically respond to the needs of our member academies and the regions that they are. But I have listed here the topics that we typically work on, which range from climate health to research integrity. And we cover biosecurity as well. So thus we were in a good position to address the proof of exercise, the proof of concept exercise that I will be talking about today for PwC. So this project was carried out successfully because of a great implementing team that included the directors of the 2 secretariats, myself and Peter McGrath. And you can see that Ljupčo and Jennifer were part of the implementing team. We were meeting weekly, bi-weekly, probably, including Easter Sundays. So a lot of hard work went behind this proof of concept exercise. And it would not be possible without very strong administrative support from both secretariats. So the objective of the project was to demonstrate the value of the creation of a BWC science advisory body through a proof of concept exercise. And what we were hoping is that by doing so, we could contribute to a consensus decision at the next review conference of the BWC. Why bother? Because there is no such mechanism today. One could argue that The BWC has survived without such an advisory mechanism for decades. However, the times are different now. There are accelerating advances in science and technology. There is increasing access to technology by all, including those that perhaps should not have access to that technology, as they can use it for inappropriate reasons. And overall, such a body can provide vital scientific expertise, foster international collaboration, and strengthen BWC's capacity altogether to fulfill its mission. For the proof of concept exercise, we consider various aspects of how such an advisory mechanism could work, including simulating the two bodies of the proposed mechanism that Ljupčo described very well, the open-ended group and the limited size group. We also simulated the different roles and responsibilities that can be played when such an advisory body is set up. How do you select a topic? How do you identify the experts, set up the agenda? How do you draft the report? And we paid a lot of attention on inclusivity and transparency of the whole process, because we knew from the beginning it would be important for the credibility, even of the proof of exercise. Regarding the timeline, it was a pretty short timeline that we worked through. The project officially started in June of 2023. The open-ended body simulated its function in November, and the limited size body in February in Trieste, Italy, where the other IAP Secretariat is hosted. And as I noted before, I wanted to move this thing and I muted myself. The goal is to use the information that came out of this exercise to inform the review conference of the BWC. Regarding the topic selection, obviously any topic could be selected that would be of interest to BWC. We chose the topic of exploring benefits and risks of AI on biosecurity and international cooperation in the context of the BWC. The reasons we chose that is because we see this issue as pressing and relevant. The implementers saw this issue as pressing and relevant. It is clearly a priority of many entities, as many of you have seen by the increasing number of events and activities on the topic. And it's very likely that it will be of interest to BWC. From the general topic that we selected and I showed in the previous slide, we identified 4 thematic questions, which were the questions that participants of the Trieste meeting addressed, and you can see the list here addressing both positive and negative impacts of AI in biotechnology and in cooperation. Selection of experts. The experts that we selected for this proof of concept exercise came from the IAP network, so they were members or part of the network of national academies, but also research institutes in different countries. We also worked very closely with the US National Academy of Sciences that also use their networks to identify the experts. They were selected because of their expertise. So we knew that we needed life scientists, and we also wanted AI experts to participate. We wanted broad regional participation, and we absolutely achieved that. We had representation at the Trieste meeting from all 5 UN regions from 32 countries. We had 38 participants in person total. Gender balance, very important, not just to check the box, but because they come different genders can come with different views on topics. And experts, very importantly, served in their individual capacity. We did not have country plates in front of our representatives, of our experts. And I have highlighted here independence that has been highlighted by the previous speakers as well. We did not screen experts for conflicts of interest or for, we did not ask them to disclose any of their current activities, but In our view, any possible national or other conflicts of biases were very much diluted because of the broad regional representation that we had at the meeting. We simulated the different roles, including the chair, vice chairs, rapporteurs, speakers, the secretariat, the science advisor. And for those roles as well, we were looking for geographic, a nice geographic distribution. The role of the science advisor was probably one of the hardest one. Jonathan, shown here, was involved in the report, the simulation of the report writing, and for leading the process of the adoption of the report in our simulated exercise, and everything had to happen in an extremely condensed schedule. Report writing typically in an advisory body can take months. The writing can take weeks, or the deliberations about how to revise a report. And we, or Jonathan, had to do that in a long night. And we discussed it at day one. We had a lot of discussion. Report writing happened that evening, and then the next day of the meeting in Trieste, we discussed the report, we revised the language. There were sentences or language that people did not agree with. We did not want to be spending time on tweaking the language, but some tweaking ends up being necessary to make sure that there is agreement at the end about the content. So several opportunities for deliberation and for expressing agreement or disagreement on the content. We learned a lot of things from this simulation about the importance of the scientific advisory body for the BWC and about the process. I'm highlighting three in the two slides that I have on lessons learned. First of all, multidisciplinarity is absolutely essential. We had, as I mentioned, experts of life sciences and AI at the meeting. What we learned is that having the social scientists and experts in data management and ethics and policy experts is also extremely crucial. It doesn't mean that all of this expertise need to be part of the advisory body, but it's very important for the advisory body to have access to that knowledge, whether it's through presentations or through smaller groups that provide their input in writing or in through briefings. Balanced representation and geographic and gender distribution, absolutely essential. For the topic that we selected, the AI and biosecurity, it was crucial to understand the differences of perspectives that the experts from developed countries have compared to experts from developing countries. As we know, AI data is mostly generated from developed countries. So the benefits that maybe a developed country could see do not necessarily translate to a developing country, or at least not at the moment. Third lesson learned that I'm highlighting here about transparency and communication. There are different ways that this can be achieved in the proof of concept, but also in a real life example of an advisory body for BWC. There can be open meetings where the experts who deliberate can have observers to listen in. And we did simulate that by having 20 observers listening in remotely to our meeting, and many of them actually, despite the time differences from Trieste to wherever they were very engaged. Press releases, we simulated that as well, and you can see here Ljupčo and Peter giving press conference to Italian newspapers. And of course, other ways to remain transparent and communicate with the different audiences through a website, updates, reports, whatever is appropriate. So success of a simulation is, of course, showing that the process works, but it's also showing that there was some progress in science or successful deliberations about the scientific matters. And I would say that we achieved that also. For example, one of the conclusions or points of emphasis that came out of the discussion is about AI-enabled protein design and synthesis, which was recognized as a capability with immediate relevance to the BWC. And it's possible that this is something that a temporary working group of appropriate experts could be working on for BWC if that was, again, if such an advisory body was actually implemented. So my last slide, the implementers' conclusion. Overall, I think we had a very successful 2 meetings that served exactly the purpose that they intended, to show that an advisory body for BWC can be established, it can work, and it can be beneficial. Here you can see, I think -1 of all the experts that were invited at the meeting. The Cuban colleague arrived a few minutes after this picture was taken. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Rania, and congratulations to you, to Jennifer and the team on what looks like a really interesting project. Indeed, it's certainly generated interest within this discussion. I've had comments in the chat asking for the report from the IAP simulation and whether this will be made available for further reading. Perhaps I can come back to you on that, because we've concluded the presentations now and I want to move to the discussion session, where we're keen to hear the views from you, the participants in the discussion. I noticed we have 2 questions so far, but I'd encourage, please, if there are questions that you have to any of the panelists, please do submit those. But perhaps I can start with a question to you, Ljupčo, and then I'll offer this out to Rania and Clarissa as well. But one of the questions we've had is, what do you think of the problems facing any mechanism, or what are the biggest roadblocks in the discussion? And I suppose linked with this, it'd be good to get your sense of possible avenues states parties can explore to overcome some of those. Please, the screen is yours, Ljupčo.
Thank you very much, and for the questions as well that have been coming in, really good ones. I'll try to perhaps address both, and apologies if it was a lot of information, but I thought that if I were just speaking, then it would be perhaps even less clear. Perhaps if we had some visual aids, it might be a bit better. In terms of starting off with what are the problems, I think that this division between a functional and a political is a good way to start about it, because there are some issues that are more in the fit for purpose, in the functional part, and there are some that are in the political. A major one, I think, has been a false dichotomy. I think in an unnecessary, perhaps, to comparison between to say that perhaps science and technology conflicts with international cooperation. I am convinced it does not, and many have already mentioned the same. This can be a mechanism, one of the mechanisms within the BWC, obviously with the ICA, that it encourages international collaboration and cooperation. This is where a lot of knowledge on the newest issues can be provided, and a lot of exchange on this. So I think that this was one of the difficulties we've had over the years. I would emphasize and start off with that we've already overcome some of those difficulties. This division between an open-ended body and a limited-sized body as 2 options has been overcome in a manner. We're all now speaking of the possibility of a hybrid model. And I understand that there are some delegations that are still thinking that perhaps one or the other is a possibility, but I think that there is a growing common understanding that this can really work. So we need to make it happen then. We need to make it functional. And in that, there are, as I've highlighted, some considerations we need to bear in mind. Some are in the questions that have been posed by participants. How are the experts chosen? How are the topics chosen, et cetera, et cetera. To start off with one of the questions on how the experts are chosen, one way of going about it is, again, starting with this timeline of a review conference that decides and then kind of starts it off with. Let's start with the most ambitious of those possibilities. A review conference or political conference that decides to have the body, to establish the body, that already has some detail about how that it would function, that even has a draft terms of reference and rules of procedure that can be right away started off with, and that even proposes a topic to be covered. The first thing then it would be to make up the membership of that of those both bodies. For the open-ended body, I think that we need to start with this aspect that has been emphasized on many occasions, latest right now by Rania. It needs to be made up by scientists and science and technology experts that have experiences in the fields that are being discussed. I think there is room for the ISU, perhaps specifically the Science and Technology Advisor there, to help with really encouraging states to nominate such experts. But I think that for the open-ended body, we can be a bit realistic, one could say, and leave that to the states parties to do on their own, to do their own vetting internally. There should be really an emphasis on having experts, but I think that for that first initial body, I think that it can be left for the states to nominate. And then the body itself meets within a given period. There should be enough time for states, obviously, to nominate experts. And during its first meeting, it can conclude that these are the experts. It can come to a point of that. I think it's critical to have a chair as well chosen for this early, because a chair and possibly vice chairs can have a key role in driving the whole process forward, not just in that first section, but I think that there's a role for the chairs and the vice chairs, possibly in running a running mechanism onward, so that then the chair can put together this list of experts for the open-ended group. And within that, there should be, we are all diplomats, we know that there is a background process of really checking if this is okay before it comes to a meeting and there are unnecessary delays in the start of the meeting, let me put it that way. So that the homework can be done by the chair and possibly vice chairs in ensuring that a list of experts for the open-ended group is made in a balanced manner ahead of time. The body meets. I think that almost immediately the possibility of opening it up for a list of nominations for the limited size body can start. Given that the proposal as it now stands considers the membership of the limited size body with experts who are already of the open-ended body, I think that there's wisdom for the open-ended body to already have a meeting, to have a discussion, so that it is seen already how it functions and who contributes in what manner. And then there can be an opening for the limited size body participation. Perhaps one can think that this is ample work to be done in the first year of an intersessional process of really establishing this body and having it functional. So a few months pass, the chair again should take a leadership role together, possibly with vice chairs or only on her or his own, to put together a well-balanced group. We don't have a director general like the OPCW that has been mentioned, like other bodies. That would be the institution, the person who would make sure that there is proper balance, proper all the political and other and functional and expertise check boxes checked. So we can rely perhaps on an institution of a bureau, let me call it, or a chair to do that properly. Such a chair would be wise not to be, again, embarrassed during the first meeting and for there to be delays again in the starting off, because then there can be a silence procedure that can be for the full membership of the limited size body that lasts a given amount of time. Before the silence procedure starts, it would be wise for that chair to make sure that nobody interrupts it. And that's, again, homework that needs to be done by a chair ahead of such a meeting. When that is when that has passed, a meeting of the limited size body can be already scheduled to start. And if necessary, at the first agenda meeting, it can be convened that this is the membership, etc., or that can finish with the silence procedure and they can go right to the work that has been given in a way by the review conference and by the open-ended group of that. So these are some of the possibilities. We do need to figure out, obviously, how exactly this functions and then how we go about the reporting. But let me stop there in terms of the possibility of how these bodies would be constituted, and perhaps I'm open to jump in again if necessary. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ljupčo. As you point out, we have a specific question about the experts' nominations. I'll read this out, and then if I could turn to you, Clarissa, and then Rania in turn to take this question. It kind of gets into issues of independence. So the question is, how can we have a decision on participation in the open-ended body or the limited number of body? How would you go about doing that? Who would set it? Who would propose the balance of necessary or required expertise for membership? And then there are some follow-up questions on participation of states parties with the limited scope of expertise of their experts. And then a point on how would membership be confirmed or in some cases potentially refused? So there's a question, and please, Clarissa, the screen is yours.
I think I can focus on the part of how do we ensure independence. I think that the first thing that comes to everyone's mind will be the selection process. And of course, it has to be transparent, but also very rigorous. And by rigorous, I mean that we can prioritize, for example, qualifications, expertise, experience. But I will also add that we also need academics or scientists that are familiarized with engaging with diplomatic audiences, that they understand how the communication happens, what are the timelines, and that the process of building trust is also necessary for both parties. That will be, I think, my top selection criteria. And I think in this way, we can also avoid biases on the advice if we have an independent group of people that is representing their own as individuals and not their countries. Another criteria could be the term limit. It will be good to perhaps balance the process of creating trust on one hand, but on the other side, also securing that new and innovative members with energy and fresh perspectives also come and join. And this is also a way to prevent ingrained self-interest if it appears at some point. And that will be also very linked to a conflict of interest declarations. I observed this at the WHO technical advisory boards. So they are asked to sign a declaration of interest. And also I will link it to monitoring. I think that could be also a big role for the ISU to monitor how are the members performing, what do they need, look at the reports, see the minutes. And this will allow us to have a scrutiny and accountability for the members as well, and secure that independence is one of the things that is prevailing through time. And I think the last thing will be representation matters. If we are thinking about, coming up with solutions to potential deliberate events that are at a global scale, we need voices from every corner to ensure that we are going to have probably good prevention, preparedness, and contingency if it happens.
Many thanks, Clarissa. I think it's a good overview of the range of tools available to states parties to try and build that independence. I think from recollection, I think when we did a report on this a couple of years ago, we had a survey which went through and presented some states parties' views on some of those options. Worth going back through that. But thank you, Clarissa. And perhaps I can turn to you now, Rania, please. The same question around independence. The screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I agree with absolutely everything that Clarissa said, so I'm not going to repeat that point. Independence of the process starts with the selection of the experts, but I think there are other parts of the process that also can retain the independence or can ruin the independence of the advisory body's work. One step after this election is that the deliberations of the experts also need to be independent of external influences. And there are ways that the influences can be introduced in the process, and this needs to be avoided. The next step, report writing. Again, this needs to remain an independent process. What the experts think needs to be translated in the report, because at the end of the day, that is the product that is being communicated. At the academies level, at least, what is very common is that every report is going through review, and this review process also adds layers of reassurance that the topics addressed are heading the right direction. The review process also needs to be independent of external influences. Report dissemination, transparency, as we said, is extremely important, and it also part of an independent process. So all that to say that the key word here is independence, but it should not only stop at the level of selecting the experts who serve on the advisory body.
Thank you, Rania. The floor is open if colleagues from the Brazilian Permanent Mission or Peter, who is also one of the friends of the chair, if you wish to take the floor, please do interrupt me or wave at me or gesture somehow, ideally politely. We have a couple of other questions here that I want to go through, and I have one, perhaps if I can take one, and there is a name inserted into this. So this is from Dr. Alexander Gionis of the Harvard Sussex program. And this is really to any panelists that want to take it. But the question relates to people's views on the most useful aspect of the OPCW Scientific Advisory Board that might work, but also the opposite, what might not work, or what would states perhaps want to avoid from that particular approach. Does anybody want to take that at all? The OPCW experience? Okay. Ljupčo, I think you were first, and then if I can turn to you, Clarissa, if that's okay.
I would leave it to Clarissa because I mean, part of our presentation, I think, was that, but then I can jump in with thought and yeah.
I quickly will just mention that the dual use nature of both in that case will be something that we can learn from, and there are equipments, reagents that are used for peaceful intents as well. So then from the OPCW, we can also understand a little bit better on terms of how they have been dealing with that dual use nature. And the verification part, I think it will be the one that will be the most different one. We are talking about the realm of genomics, genes, proteomics, proteins, and genetically engineered organisms, if that's what happens. So I will, I will ask the audience, how do you imagine the biosurveillance of a living organism being monitored? And what are, again, what I was saying in one of my slides, what are the infrastructure expertise that we will need to collect this data, analyze it on time, real time probably, and take decisions. And the third thing that also I could mention is that the technical advice requires diverse expertise, as Rania mentioned, and not just in terms of technicalities, but also at the level of social and humanities. So if we are talking about responding to a bioengineered organism, so we are going into the realm not just of health, but we are talking about transport and scientific, legal, policy, security, many realms. So I think that is key, as Rania said as well, to have this type of advice close at hand. Thank you.
Thanks, Clarissa. Ljupčo, did you want to follow up on that at all, or Rania? Ljupčo, please.
I mean, I think that there are, again, two types of question. And again, I would put it in there's one is a political, the other one is the more substantial, and it deals with the nature of the sciences. The political part is that it has different structures because it has developed different regime around the convention. Again, we don't have Director General, and I think that already in that comparison, we need to take it somewhat differently, and then it trickles down into all the other possibilities. This brings in the issue of verification that Clarissa already mentioned, and because the verification there is based again on the science, the differences in the sciences needs to be somewhat emphasized here. We're dealing with live organisms that can self-replicate, and you can have a very small amount, then be very quickly developed into something that is a pathogen that is dangerous in a very short period of time. A small brewery or a vaccine development facility can be really redirected to these kinds of things. So I think that one is, again, the political, which stems, I think, to a degree on the differences between the sciences. There are good examples to be taken from the OPCW and the CWC, and we should obviously take them into consideration. But the BWC is an older one, obviously, a convention that has developed its own rhythm, and we need to think of how do we ensure a functioning mechanism within the framework that exists already in the BWC.
Thank you, Ljupčo. I think both Clarissa and yourself have raised a number of good questions there, and perhaps also questions for consideration in future events, webinars and discussions as well. Rania, I don't know whether you had any thoughts on the OPCW SAB in response to the question from, okay. In that case, I have another question I wanted to put to all of you, and this is probably a little bit of a tricky one, but the question reads as follows. What are the financial implications of a science mechanism, and how do costs compare with the verification system? I would caveat any answer to this by pointing out that I think we're always going to find that the costs will vary depending on what you want to do, both in terms of verification, but also in terms of a science mechanism. So I'm not sure that's necessarily going to be a helpful comparison, but I'd be interested in any thoughts the panelists may have about that. And perhaps I could turn to you, Rania, if you'd like to take the screen.
Sure, let me give the answer not in the BWC context, but what I usually respond to sponsors of the US National Academy of Sciences Studies when we tell them how much what they are asking for will cost. And I don't know what the cost in this specific situation is. So I think it's the best value for money. So imagine if you had to pay money for these 25 or 35 global experts to come together, the time that they spend to think about the problem and provide their advice. So the cost to actually, if in most of the cases in advisory bodies, you don't compensate the experts, all you pay for is the secretariat support or the staff support and then travel. So it's the best value for money for what you get. I would put it that way.
So that's a good answer. Thank you. Ljupčo or Clarissa, did you want to take the floor on this? Yeah, please, the floor is yours.
I feel obliged, having spent the better part of 2018 dealing with this issue. Let's start with the nature again of the BWC, and then specifically here the financial aspect of it, which we needed to solve in 2018. The Biological Weapons Convention is not part of the UN system. I think that many people still don't realize that. There are very important connections to it. There's a UN General Assembly resolution. There are many different ways that it is supported. It is supported by the Secretary General, et cetera, but it's an independent body that exists in some ways under the UN regulations for bodies that are not part of the UN. This makes it a very difficult institution to manage year to year. The policies that we took in 2018 and that the ones that were taken during the review conference ensure that this is not an issue. But again, we don't have a Biological Weapons Convention. We don't have an OPCW. We don't have something that is in continuity that we know will exist in 10 years. It might not. If there isn't a review conference decision, there is no Biological Weapons Convention support. There is the convention itself, obviously, but there are no supporting mechanisms to it, right? So I think that's the first important part to be considered. The second is obviously the price. At the moment, it was 1.5 until the 9th review conference. Now I believe it's 2.2 million. Right? That's, I mean, you know, for many countries the fees are under 1,000. For many they are under $100 per year. And I think that we need to communicate that. I've said this many times, and I'll keep on repeating it. We as diplomats don't always do a good job of communicating what is the value of diplomacy, what is the value of constantly meeting and discussing certain issues. What are the security? What was just mentioned, the value for money by Rania. What's the value for money of having these meetings? Is it as valuable as one hypersonic missile, or which actually costs a lot more? Is it the value of, like, what is the security value These are the types of political discussions that need to be had domestically in many countries, of that the Biological Weapons Convention provides value. Having a science advisory body within it has value that cannot be put into simple language, though we should try. Now, specifically, when we get to it, we know exactly what the costs are for most of the things within the BWC. We know what the cost of a P5 and a P4 and a P3 officer are. We know we can estimate those very easily. So it will depend on how many officers and how we strengthen the ISU, and this is one of the things. The meetings as well, we have very good estimates of what a meeting costs. By the way, that means 5 UN languages. It means interpretation, it means translation, it means all of these kinds of things that come with it. So I think that there is value to be had if the open-ended body were to have, not to confuse the word hybrid, so because it's been used in a different manner here, so to have the possibility of online collaboration and participation. So if it has that, we start reducing some of the ways. We can have experts from national ministries then jump in and have those meetings. So it can be some kind of a model that has both live participation within Geneva and the possibility to others to jump in. When we get to the limited size body, I think it is very important that that body, to ensure the independence that we've spoken of, has a budget for the travel of the participants to come to Geneva for the meetings that are there, that is not paid by their own governments, that is paid by the assessed contributions that is within the whole budget. That is going to mean obviously an increase, but it is value for money to have that. And again, the increase for many states is going to be the tens of dollars, some in the hundreds, and for a few for 1,000, and for just a handful above 10,000 per year. That's, I think, that very high value for money.
Thank you, Ljupčo. Clarissa, you raised your hand, please. The screen is yours, man.
Yeah, I think the answer to this is also very linked of what each country, state party envisions to happen. And maybe we can think that this is a late step, but in reality, it's a crucial early step to think what is expected from delegates, from countries to do or to decide about after they receive a science and tech report, right? What do we do with this? Are we aiming to use this to aid us in a process? Which process? Are we planning that the insights of the report maybe are going to help for the prioritization of the ICA, International Cooperation and Assistance? Is that something that is going to help us to decide what are the projects that are more aligned with the recent developments and the needs that the convention has? Or perhaps we also want to dedicate some part to future education. Maybe we do some capacity building on some topics that came up from this report, and we see that the state parties need to have some knowledge increase in that side. Or are we going to go for verification efforts? So it really depends on what's your vision for the convention for the next years and how many lenses we put on future lenses, any lens that you want to put to be like future proof, let's say.
Great, thank you, Clarissa. Just if it's just a note, I think we did a calculation of this a couple of years ago and came up with, I think it was 400,000 for a hybrid meeting, but that depends really on a certain number of weeks of discussion, a certain number of staff, and there are a number of variables which could be changed to fit into that. So it depends, as Clarissa pointed out, what do you want to do with this? And then kind of, I think that idea of working backwards. I'm conscious we're running out of time, and I want to turn to Peter, who has provided us a video with some closing remarks. But before we do that, I did want to offer people 1 minute for any closing remarks. There is another question about imagining the convergence of a BW specific expert group with others in the WHO. If any of the panelists would like to take that within a minute, please feel free to do so. But other than that, you're welcome to make any closing remarks or comments you'd like to. And perhaps if I could begin with you, Rania, would that be okay? The floor is yours, madam.
Thank you, Jamie. My closing remark is that I truly hope that this proof of concept exercise gives those who are either a bit hesitant or they needed some more reassurance about the feasibility of having an advisory body for BWC, that it achieved that goal. I really thought it was successful. It's doable. It takes a lot of time. It needs to be based on consensus, and I hope that the BWC will head that way. advice is always, scientific advice is very crucial for decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Rania. Perhaps, Ljupčo, is there any closing thoughts from your side in space of a minute?
You mentioned JB 1979 was the first time that this was mentioned. We are gonna celebrate 50 years of the ratification of the convention next year. We already celebrated 50 years of the first signing of the convention. It's way overdue, and I think that thinking that it has functioned so far, it can function into the future, does not hold water, because the nature of the science is changing. The nature of the world is changing, the international system is changing, and I think that there is a need for an objective scientific and technological advice within the BWC that provides states parties with the knowledge that they need to make the decisions that they need on this very complex issue that is on our agenda. So I think that it is high time that we do that. We can do a lot of the details, I think, in the coming months. Probably a few small parts will remain for a final decision, but I think that we're near there. We need to really cross that finish line this year.
Thank you, Ljupčo, and I hope it could be one of a series of birthday gifts for the BWC at 50. Clarissa, please, the penultimate word to you.
Yeah, just to remind all state parties, all delegates, that the ISU is here to support you, to help you with anything you need. Any technical requests, please just let us know. If we cannot solve it immediately, we are gonna find someone to help you solve those questions. And we're happy that we have the IIP, the International Science Council, as good partners of us.
Right. Thank you, Clarissa. I'm afraid our time is up. But before closing, I'm going to give the final word to Peter Babigumira Habwe. Peter is a technical advisor of the Uganda Ministry of Health, and he's also one of the Friends of the Chair for the Science and Technology Mechanism. Peter has been following this discussion and is still present, but I understand due to changes in his travel arrangement, he has actually had to set off to the airport. So rather than provide closing remarks while driving, we thought it would be safer to actually share a short recorded video. So perhaps, Maria, if you could play Peter's remarks. Thank you.
As we come to the end of the webinar, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you for the time you've taken to join us, the Friends of the Chair, and our great collaborators, UNIDIR, for hosting this webinar, and for all the wonderful speakers who have been able to join us. Science and Technology Advisory Mechanism is a very important issue, and we cannot overstate that it's an important issue for everyone. In such a rapidly changing world, we need to be able to rapidly understand the science, because without the science as a foundation for our decision making, we are bound to make errors. In the coming weeks and months, many more activities are going to happen, such as informal sessions going further into the subject matter, dealing with issues such as composition and the like. And even during the August meeting of the working group, we'll have a day dedicated to the subject matter. So we really hope that we can continue to be appraised of what is happening, and especially for those who are not Geneva-based, continue to follow what's happening, follow the sessions, and continue to advise your governments and your decision makers as appropriately. And we hope that we can all work together towards having the successful result of an agreed upon Science and Technology Advisory Mechanism for the Biological Weapons Convention. Thank you very much and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Peter, and we wish you safe travels. Just before closing, if anybody else from the panelists or perhaps the Brazilian Permanent Mission, Bárbara, did you wish to take the floor? The screen's yours.
Yes, of course, James. I wanted to thank you and the UNIDIR as a whole, and the UNODA, and all my all the co-panelists that are here, and with whom I have learned a lot. I was Ambassador D'Amico's eyes and ears right here today, but in the following sessions that are about to take place, he himself will take part. And I'm looking forward to the next ones on the 6th of May on confidence building and transparency, and on national implementation on the 8th of May, and on compliance and verification on the 30th of May. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for this very productive exchange of ideas.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for going through the dates and the events. That's very useful and saves me having to do it, so very much appreciated. Just before we do close, if I can encourage you to complete, there is an online feedback form. It does only take a couple of minutes. It is anonymous, and you can find the link in the chat. But it does help us in terms of developing our events, other things we should do better, differently, or other topics we should look at. Before wrapping up, though, I'd like to thank our speakers today. Thank you to our colleagues in UNODA and the Friends of the Chair on the topic, as well as Bárbara, Leandro, and the team with the Brazilian mission. I'd also like to thank those who have supported this and helped with the production and making this possible. It's my colleagues Maria and Clarissa, and thanks to all of you for joining us online. We hope to see you at the next event, which, as Barbara pointed out, will take place on the 6th of May, but all details are available on the website. And with that, have a good afternoon if you're here in Geneva, or a good day, good night, depending on where you are. Thank you.